Hello everyone, welcome back to our third episode of CaF Youth Virtual Forum powered by CRCN. My name is Tanika Sukratana and I am an ASEAN Art and Culture Creation Associate at CRCN. It is such an honor to be back once again to serve you as the main moderator of this special online series. So, uh, for those who join us for the very first time, our CaF Youth Forum is will be broadcast on every Tuesdays from 6 to 7 p.m. at Bangkok, Hanoi, or Jakarta times. But however, because now we are on the third episode, we have one more episode left which is next Tuesday. Next Tuesday will be our last episode for the season, and for the topic of every episode will be based on the theme called From Crisis to the Next Normal, which will focus on the things that have changed during the COVID-19 and what happened after. And each topic will be discussed by our amazing arts and youth leaders from various fields. And at the end of each episode, we will share the summary and discussion that we have on our CRCN official website or worldwideweb.crcn.org, or as you can see on the screen below here. And for this particular episode, we will discuss with our amazing speakers on the topic called the rapid shifting of media consumption. So with no further ado, here is our three ASEAN speakers of the day. I will let each one of them to introduce themselves to you, starting with Mr. Samuel. Please, could you kindly introduce yourself? You are on the mute mode. Could you unmute, please?
All right, it happens a lot. Thank you, guys. So my name is Samuel. I'm from Malaysia. So over in Malaysia, I've spent the last 4 years working in the business development and also the marketing field. Specifically, working closely with clients from the education field. So I focus a lot on specifically universities around Malaysia. And also, right now, I'm transitioning into private and international schools as well. So, what do I do essentially is to help clients basically move onwards or move forward using digital technologies into their day-to-day um, marketing. So in Malaysia, for those who may not have lived the experience here in Malaysia, for a student to know anything about a university, they would probably need to go physically to the university and get information from there, aside from the website. So my job here is to really help the university to diversify their digital approaches and sort of help them or ease them into the digital realm. Also with that, I also come up with strategies to help them to improve their sales conversion, um, and also strategies to help them to see a long-term investment for that. Other than that, I'm also a YCD alumni, and I also run my own NGO with that based in Malaysia. So with this NGO, the project also we try to focus a lot on aspects, hoping to reach out to the young audiences here in Malaysia. Yep, that's it about me. Thanks.
Thank you for your introduction. So next, Mr. Pongpiti, please kindly introduce yourself to our amazing audience.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Pongpiti Pasukir, or you can easily call me Pert. Yeah, it's more easier. So I'm a founder of Ad Addict, which is an online publisher about advertising, marketing, and creativity based in Bangkok, Thailand. As an online publisher about advertising and creativity, I have a chance to work with many clients, and I also got a chance to be in many events, both local and international, such as Cannes Lion, which some of you guys may heard about it. And I'm also a jury in some advertising award as well. So it's a very great opportunity for me to always update about the news, about the strategy in the advertising field. And before I start my own business, I was a strategic planner in the creative agency. And now today, besides running my own business, I'm also a master degree teacher at Bangkok University. So it's very nice to meet all of you guys today. And thank you, Casean, again for an invitation to be a part of this session. I'm very excited. So today I will share some of my point of view, my opinion about from the advertising and communication side, which I hope everyone to enjoy about it.
Thank you very much. Next, we move on to Jeff. Could you kindly introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Xian, or you can call me Jeff if that makes it easy. I actually come from a slightly different background. I'm a technologist. I've been a computer programmer since I was 12. I grew up with computers. And when I grew up, actually, I didn't really know what to do, what I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be doing something related to technology. So when I studied abroad in Singapore, the whole advertising industry pulled me in because, well, I needed a way to survive in Singapore. Singapore is not a cheap place to be in. So I needed a way to sustain myself, get a freelance job, etc. So I started working for different ad agencies based out of Singapore because at the time technology was still not seen together as a marketing channel or marketing tool. So my job was to build stuff for these agencies. 7 years ago, I then came back to Myanmar. I founded a company called Next Steps. We are one of the largest digital agencies in Myanmar. Our offering is really into two different verticals. We look at technology and we look at marketing. In technology, we primarily work with financial services. So what we do is helping clients to understand user experience, UX, as well as to do product design, building out stuff, and actually managing the whole technology stack for financial services. For advertising, my main clientele is mainly FMCG clients. So I work with Nestle, et cetera, et cetera. So on that side, our job is really to figure out how to use technology in their advertising efforts. So it's not strictly offline. It's primarily focus on online advertising. Some are a lot more experiential, using how do we use VR, AR, etc. in these, advertising campaigns. So, yep, that's who I am. I'm really much looking forward to discussing with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We also look forward to that as well. And before we move to the questioning session, for our audience, if you have any question that you want to ask our speakers, you can post your question on our Facebook Live at the comment section, and we will choose your question to be answered in our live if our live forum. So moving on, for the first, as we all know that COVID-19 has destroyed the balance of the world, how people live, how people work, how business business can no longer do things as usual. So, for the first question, I would like to ask that, in your opinion, how have media consumption habits have changed due to the COVID-19, or what is the trend have changed? Starting with Sam, what is your point of view on this?
All right. Okay. So it will happen, I think, throughout this whole show. All right. I think we have to first start by understanding what are the media trends before the COVID-19 itself. I can't speak for all countries, but I think in Malaysia, we see very similar patterns globally, in a general sense. So we have the different targets of different age range. We have the boomers, which are mostly our parents. You also have the Gen X, and then you also have us, which are the millennials, and you also have the Gen Y. Gen Z already, sorry. So they are essentially, all of us, we interact with media consumption differently. So throughout, I think the last 5 years or so, we tend to see that our parents are more engaged with television and radios compared to us. So when we were growing up, we don't see much of TVs unless if it's a cable news network. So for Malaysians who are watching, probably you know Astro, and what today our modern version of online streaming would be Netflix. So a lot of things have changed then, right? But then when you have the COVID pandemic, you also have to understand that the pandemic allows very different for everyone to have, which is time. So there are a lot of time that needs to be spent. A lot of people have this sudden surge of time and space, and they need to fill the void. So when we look at the media consumption here in Malaysia, we have a huge interest in Netflix, TikTok, Instagram. So very visual related content that has been on the rise throughout the whole 3 months of lockdown in Malaysia. So we first see the month of March, the social media was filling up this void where we don't know what to do. So eventually in April, people got a bit more creative and went into TikTok. And then you can see a lot more TikTok trends coming up, a lot more creative content that is coming up. But then when you come to June, then you get May, then you get more people to be more creative in that space, sharing on different types of visual content. But in terms of consumption-wise, when you look at the percentages from across generation, maybe we should focus on millennials today. So for millennials, we consume the highest when it comes to online news content in Malaysia. So a lot of us actually use digital news to look up for information, be more informative about what is going on out there, especially in the development of COVID-19. And at the same time, we also have the second highest, which is Netflix, or online streaming websites that we subscribe to. So this is something very unique. I think only the pandemic can drive towards, So like some people, like for myself, I didn't actually thought of using Netflix until like, okay, maybe it's a good time to invest in Netflix and trend as well. Not only me, but across all the globe as well. TikTok is something that I really like to talk about because I think it's something very unusual, very unique to the Asian region, ASEAN region. So we have a lot of people being involved in TikToks and of course creating their own content. But looking at this is the more on the personal side, but looking at more on the business side, we have a lot of education clients like mine. They don't really have the means to go online because they are so used to newspaper ads, radio ads, billboard ads, and when people are not going out, their business starts to drop and their brand engagement starts to go down. So they find it very difficult to um, get into the sphere for the first time where social media is something very unique to them and they have not had the chance to actually engage with any form of social media. It was a very tricky time for a lot of clients or a lot of education clients in Malaysia. At the same time, when it comes with millennials or when it comes to Gen Z, the type of engagement that they need is mostly digital. So you can see like the media consumption is here, where it's everything digital, but a lot of businesses struggle to make the connection with each other. So yeah, I guess of course we also have a huge trend in terms of a lot of digital ads being shown, especially in April and June, where a lot of language apps are being shown. A lot more hobby related apps are being shown. Gaming, surprising, there's a lot of mobile gaming apps ads being shown as well. But you also have a huge amount of live sessions like this. So I think so used to have meetings already online. So this is something that a lot of people are also consuming from. So we can see that we are able to adapt to changes like that. And this is a very interesting trend to me. I see this more from the education side as well as the Malaysian audiences. Yep.
Yes, thank you very much for such an insightful talk. So, we move on to our next speaker, Mr. Pongpiti. What is your point of view on the short-term effect of COVID-19 towards the change of media consumption during the lockdown, please?
Okay, thank you. During the COVID-19 crisis, as I work in the advertising and communication field as a publisher, I got a chance to talk with many agency and marketer via my Facebook Live, which is a new format that I start in the COVID time as well. And actually tonight I have a session live about in 8 p.m. Yeah, so you some of your guys, if you Thai people, you can watch it as well. So I saw a lot of behavior that have changed, which I summarize as like a three behavior trends, with some of them quite similar as before. The first one is online media is already a new mainstream. If we went back a couple years ago when we asked people about what is your mainstream media, I think it might be television, out of home, or some of them we say online media for sure. But nowadays, when I ask about the media during the COVID that happens, I think most of us will say that online media is the most used platform, especially social media. For an example, in Thailand, there are a huge growth of TikTok user in Thailand. Some of influencer, content creator, and celebrity start to use it during the COVID-19 to keep their audience entertained by joining in many challenges that happen in TikTok. This is the first one. And the second one is about the streaming content consumption. During the pandemic, people have to stay at home, right? But they still want to entertain themselves. So every streaming platform was very popular on that time, such as Netflix, YouTube, and also Spotify. But the one that quite interesting for me is voice content, especially podcasts. This kind of media continuing growing in Thailand, which is start growing since last year. Actually, I already got my own podcast program and channel as well. So we will see a lot of new podcasters around those time, with some of them that their program are very interesting on that time. And the third one that I think is quite a key behavior that changed is e-marketplace is a new way of life. During the pandemic, we spend a lot of time at home, such as working at home, studying at home. So we are staying at home all the time. I think most of us already found that we need many things more when we stay at home. So the e-commerce platform is one of the best place that we can still find anything that we want to buy. According to the stat that I found when I talk with some marketer, one of the most popular thing that people buy during the COVID time is a home decoration thing, such as working desk, comfy chair, and also some plants for the fresh air, fresh environment. But not only about the e-commerce. In Thailand, we have a quite one of the disruptive idea called University Marketplace, which is a Facebook group start with a university community to let people that were studying in that university who own a business that affect from COVID-19 can share about their product and service and let other can see and buy what they want. This is very the simple idea, but it can change a way to start a small business for Thai people. And we will see a lot of small business start from here. And now it's still highly active and very popular till now. So I think these are those three behavioral trends that I researched, and I think this is quite a very important information that marketer and brands and company have to understand it. But if we talk about what will remain or what will be changed, if like for now the situation is better, right? And the lockdown is already gone. So I think some of the behavior will remain and some of the trend will be changed, in a couple months. About the thing that I think it will be remain for a while, I think it's about the at-home activities that I mentioned before, about online media consumption, voice content streaming, and also e-commerce shopping. Because this kind of behavior, I think if they already changed, it will be changed forever. But in the other hand, after the lockdown, people will not comfortable to go any place as before, right? So I think the consumer will concern more about the hygiene, that every place they're going have to be clean in every journey that they have. For an example, if we go into the restaurant in the mall, for now, I think we are all expected to have alcohol gel in front of the restaurant, and after that, in the table, the plate, and everything have to be very clean. And also the waiter and waitress have to wearing a mask as well. So I think it's quite an important thing that the brand have to be serious about this to keep consumer trust and make every journey of consumer more hygienic. Besides of consumer trend in terms of in the agency side that I have talked to them a lot, most of agency now they are changing their communication objective because before the most popular objective, the communication objective was awareness or consideration, but now it will be conversion because the agency and the brand have to make the cost more effective. I think it's my point of view. There are quite a key three behavior trends, and some of them will remain for a while. Some of them will be changed. Is my opinion.
Insightful opinion. So let's move on to our next speaker, Jeff. For Jeff, what do you think about the short-term effect or the trend of the media consumption that affected by COVID-19, please?
Sure. In my country, Myanmar, the interesting thing is a lot of these things were already happening before COVID. And part of the reason why I think is because Myanmar consumers are it's a young market, right? Because just about 5 years ago, we started having internet. Before that, we never had internet. So, overnight, we went from having, 100,000, 500,000 internet users to about 25 to 30 million internet users in a country that's only about 51 million people. So overnight, everybody got access to the internet. And the interesting thing is the for most people, especially the younger generation, which is also where the population density is, the smartphone is the only media consumption device that they had ever in their lives. So they never had TV, they never had radio, they never had tapes, they never had anything. So therefore, they basically grew up with TikTok, they grew up with Facebook, they grew up with pretty much everything, right? So what COVID did, in my opinion, was that it accelerated two things. Number one, it accelerated usage of these, let's call it digital media and digital services for people who are already using them. And second, it also brought in new first-time users of a different demographic group. So let's start with point number one, the acceleration. During COVID, when we look at urban areas, which is basically the capital city and the top tier cities, tier one cities, there's been a lot of abundance of usage of food delivery apps. I mean, during COVID, it was much more obvious because you couldn't go out. And if you could go out, the only thing you would see would be, we're not allowed to ride motorbikes, so bicycles. So there are bicycles everywhere from, Grab, Foodpanda, local players, etc., etc. The interesting thing is that just before COVID, I would say 2-3 weeks before COVID, you would never see that in Yangon. You would never see that in urban areas. People don't order from food delivery apps because food is, it's not a habit that they are used to because they can go out, they like the Burmese people like the social element of eating. So they want to hang out together and they want to eat together, whether that's with the family. Usually they eat with their families or with their friends, etc. So buying out, taking out through a food delivery is a luxury that's only available for a very small group of people. But that changed very quickly overnight. Just from a demand perspective, I did hear actually between Foodpanda and Grab, they were doing about, let's say, 1,000 deliveries a day in one city. That got accelerated to close to about 8,000 in a matter of weeks, right? So because I think the interesting thing is on the supply side, right? These delivery guys, they also got out of jobs because COVID unfortunately put a lot of people out of jobs. So, you have a huge demand for delivery and then you have a lot of people who would actually deliver, then it's a match made in heaven, right? So a lot of people started to use those services. And in the rural areas, the interesting thing that happened was, of course, in Myanmar, we also see the usage of TikTok a lot. But before COVID, it never really was, it's a channel that a lot of brands think about, but from a secondary tier 2 or tier 3 channel. It's not a primary communications or primary engagement channel for a lot of brands. During COVID, especially with my clientele in fast-moving consumer goods, TikTok literally became the number one channel, taking over Facebook that they talk about. I don't know for what reasons, but seems to be the adoption of TikTok just exploded, overnight, especially for rural area. One thing that, for those who haven't been to Myanmar, one thing that we have to understand is in Myanmar, data is very, very cheap. In fact, we are probably cheaper than Malaysia and Thailand. We are one of the cheapest, and the internet connectivity is everywhere, and it's good. It's 4G internet. However, we have to understand that a lot of these consumers live on $1 per day budget, not internet budget per se. Basically, their income is capped at $1 a day or $2 a day, right? But TikTok, on the other hand, is an interesting one because it's a video content. Therefore, it's quite data intensive. So one thing happened, which is the telcos. They stepped in. They wanted to create this behavior of consuming a lot of videos. So they stepped in and made video content free for Facebook and TikTok, which is why I think there's a lot of shift in media consumption, especially media consumption and content creation in these rural areas. Coming back to this whole concept of, I think Pong Piti talked about it as well, which is shifting towards conversion, right? The interesting that we're seeing now is if we look at the trend of watching video, we started seeing a lot more live selling events. I'm not sure if that is happening in Thailand and Malaysia. Probably it is. What we're seeing is, a typical online shop, which actually doesn't have a website or anything. They sell it usually through Facebook groups. They usually import products from China, Thailand, pretty much everywhere. They basically started broadcasting themselves out of the blue. So yesterday, I saw a very interesting live cast of this one lady. She's probably in the older demographic group. She started selling jewelry online by, basically trying different necklaces, different rings, etc. on live video, and the amount of people actually buying it is just phenomenal. Like you would see comments after comments after comments. And I thought initially that was only happening for these individual sellers. But recently, there has also been more professional companies, including brands and distributors, that only used to sell it to distributors or the middlemen. Now they're selling directly to consumers through these live sales. And interestingly, they've also started using influencers as an agent to sell some of these products in a live sale. The other one that we also saw was, of course, gaming. We've seen a tremendous growth, almost a jump of about 80% in gaming consumption. And therefore, we're also seeing that the brands are shifting quite a bit of their budget towards gaming in replacing all of these offline events that used to happen. So it'll be interesting, I think, in the next couple of months to figure out, now that the lockdown is over, how much of this is actually going to stick. For me, as a digital-oriented person, I do like to believe that it will stick because, like what my co-panelists have said, once a behavior is formed, it's really hard to go back to the old ways of doing things. So hopefully it will stick, and I think it's for the better as well, right? For everybody, where content becomes and media becomes more easily accessible, cheaper, more interesting for everybody.
Yes, thank you very much for such an interesting and insightful talk. Now let's move on to the next question. Actually, most of you answered the second question to some extent, but we can go deeper on that. So, when we think about that in the near future, maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, when the COVID is already gone from the world, or maybe we already have a vaccine at that moment already, so we no longer have to be concerned about when we that we will get infected again. So what do you think is what kind of trend that in terms of media consumption in the next 2 or 3 years when COVID-19 is out of the question? Yeah. So Sam, what do you think? Maybe what business should do in order to cope with the new change that maybe that will stick or maybe will change to a new direction?
Okay. So with this question, I think maybe I'll share more about what is the situation like in Malaysia a bit more. So I think the government of Malaysia has pushed a lot of initiative going towards cashless payment options. So we have a lot of e-payment, e-transactions going on. But also we see the rise of e-commerce, right? So a lot of businesses, I think both panelists also sort of mentioned briefly, in their respective countries. It's similar trends here also in Malaysia. Malaysia traditionally as a country, we are not very digitally savvy when it comes to digitalizing the business. So when I mentioned about the higher education industry, that's one of the best examples that I can give where they have not invested so much in digital ads or digital marketing in general per se until the last 5 years. But with the COVID, it sort of made it accelerate, and conversion is very important at that point in time. I would say like any behavior, because we already cultivated, for 3 months plus, it will stay. And I think for Malaysia, in the Malaysian context, it changes the way how we interact with brands, especially through the purchasing or the transaction aspect. So how we want to buy things now, we have a lot of e-commerce platforms, even to just buy day-to-day food items, and also from something as cheap from Lazada or Shopee. So a lot of things here is going cashless, but I would say it's still in the early stages. It's not deeply rooted in all of the communities yet in Malaysia. Um, and at the same time, I would say I'm not too sure. This is something that I hope it will happen, where the education industry, we are going a little bit more involved in terms of providing more digital options for students to study. So, like students who are in very difficult to go to the campus, or they couldn't afford to pay accommodation on campus, and things like that, they can choose to study online. Or I don't know how the mechanism will work, but the idea of it is to provide more flexible learning options, especially for people who are in the postgraduate level, people who are working adults, people who are running business, but interested to upskill themselves. So these options are already available in Malaysia. It's just that a lot of people are still a little bit conscious about going to classrooms that do not have a lecturer in front of them. So this behavior has definitely changed for the so like Gen Z and millennials who are in between the period of getting a degree and getting their masters. So some of us, at least who are a bit more digitally savvy, we are quite familiar with the trend. But as a whole country, we are still moving into that direction. Um, I think the third point of view would be, I would say, as marketer myself, we find that content is something that were taken sort of for granted previously. Everything was about sale, but right now there is a need for us to go a little bit more humanized in the things that we sell. So as the generation gets younger, the way they see brands are different. So if we keep pushing for a ad, for example, to be shown to um, like let's just say someone younger than me, they would probably say, okay, this is an ad. So they would just probably swipe scroll up through their mobile phones. But we see that there is also a lot of need for like influencers, people who gives a more human touch to the brand. I like to use example of people like a university, right? So all of us here are probably, a master's holder or a degree holder, the viewers as well. So the university is not only just a wall, like, okay, I go classroom, the classroom is nice, you have a chair, you have aircon, but what's beyond that, right? So these are the generation where they need that kind of human touch, and through content, that's the only way we are able to engage with them. So I see this as a trend, not only because of the pandemic, but also because of this is the kind of generation that we are dealing with, in terms of how they approach brands and how they appreciate some form of brands. Yeah, that would be it for me.
Very much.
Thank you.
Next, we move on to Mr. Pongpiti. What is your point of view the on the new trend of media consumption, if we going to have it or not? What do you think would be the marketing strategy for the business in the next 2 or 3 years to cope with the new change?
Okay, thank you for the question. In my perspective, there are some media consumption trends that I think they will be still active for a while in a couple of years, even the COVID is already gone. There are some small behavior that I think is quite important for brand and marketer to understand it. The first one is people, especially young generation, will be more seriously to follow about the news that will be affect their life in some day, such as economic news, politic news, because they already know that everything can be happen. So I think they are knowing about the thing more quickly. If they know more quickly, they can adjust their plan of their life more quickly as well. So it's the first one. And the second one, during the COVID crisis, I think we already experienced some new experiences that make us realize that we can keep our life to online platform, such as working from home and study from home. But as a human being, we love to be socialized with others. So virtual experience will be the alternative to the physical experience, which we will continually get used to it. such as an virtual conference like now, yeah, that we have the conference live as well. That will be an alternative way, the alternative solution for an actual event. By the way, I think every brand and organization and every company have to keep updating about their consumer behavior because I believe that everything didn't last long forever and those behavior as well. But when we talk about the future, I think some of your guys, yeah, that you question me. How about the next marketing strategy? So about the marketing strategy for the business, for the company, for the brand, which I may focus on the communication strategy today. I think that during the situation of COVID-19, there are many case study that we can learn some tips from them, which I came up with like a full communication strategy that I think is really important for the brand to adapt it to make your brand stay last long forever. The first one is create experience, not just an ad. When we talk about marketing or communication to attract the consumer, I think most of us begin to start thinking about ads, which is the one-way communication. But I think the best way to communicate with the consumer nowadays is creating an experience because people will forget what they see, they will forget what they hear, but I think they will not forget what they feel. So if you can make them feel by creating some experience, I think you can win their heart better than create just an ad. So the second one is a brand for the brand. The brand have to be sincere with the consumer because consumer today are very clever. Brand must not insult the consumer by creating communication that didn't tell the truth because consumer they can find the facts by themselves in the online information. There's a lot of things that they can find themselves. So brand has to be sincere with the consumer. And the third one is a brand purpose is very important. Some of the brand only focus on the short-term sale. I saw a lot of the case that they have a lot of promotion during the COVID-19, but you have to think like the long term of brand building, which is to start from brand purpose. The brand have to have like a strong belief that what you have to what is your stand for, yeah. Because if you have already have like a brand strong brand purpose, you have to express it like in every experience, every journey that make consumer know that you are very strong and very want to do this really, yeah. I think it's very important for everyone to have like to sit back and let's talk with the team to find a strong brand purpose. And the last one is don't forget to prepare crisis strategy because we are already learned from the past, right? That anything can be happen all the time. So every company must prepare the crisis strategy that helps the brand more adaptive to every situation that might happen in the future. So I think those are four key communication strategy that I have learned from many case studies and I want to share with you today. And the last thing that I want to keep remind all of you guys is don't believe what I say today because there are no specific formula, right? You know, in Malaysia it's another way, in the another place it's like another way, and another brand if they also in Bangkok in Thailand, but if they're like in another industry, maybe the formula or the trend that I told you before might not work for you guys. So I think the best way is to find your own formula that match with your business, which I think you guys can make it for sure. Yeah, it's my point of view.
For such insightful and interesting opinion. So let's move on to our last speaker, Jeff. What is your point of view on the strategy or the future trend of media consumption?
I believe both of the panelists have covered this quite extensively. I just want to add on a few more points. I think, like I said, I think the same trends are going to keep happening, just that they're going to keep happening faster now. One, I think we're all going to spend a whole lot more time on our mobile devices, especially our smartphones. That's pretty much a given now. Second, there's going to be a lot of focus on both audio and video consumption, I think. there's already been a lot of shift in terms of news as well, shifting towards more of podcast type of engagement as well as video content. So that I think will be accelerated as well. And number three, which from a marketer perspective, it's challenging is because I think because of all these shifts, our attention span is going to be smaller and smaller and smaller and lesser and lesser and lesser. We're used to consuming content that's an hour long. Now, if the content is less than or more than 1 minute, we're already very impatient. Right? I think that's really driven by the fact that everyone's on TikTok, so they keep scrolling up to see 30 seconds of something else. So I think that trend is definitely going to have a lot of impact on how brands communicate with their consumers and the channels that they would choose in the future. In terms of the strategy, I agree with both of the panelists. I think we all need to go back to the basics of brand building and think about what do we actually really stand for. Especially, I feel that a lot of international brands need to start thinking about that as well, because the whole brand landscape I feel is getting a lot more saturated, and also a lot of these international brands are following the regional guidelines, etc. However, I really like what Pong Piti said. Not every country is the same. Not every brand is the same. So therefore, why do you need to actually follow your regional guidelines when you're building a brand in a specific country? What works in Malaysia may not work in Myanmar, right? So I think that's really the key lesson that everyone, including big and small brands, need to adapt. And secondly, I do believe that we need to start putting efforts in experimenting, trying out new channels, because you never know what's going to come up. And especially for a mature brand, I think that's very important. I feel that a lot of mature brands rely too much on research data. While research is good, research is basically researching past behavior and not predicting future behavior. I think there's a level of experimentation that every brand, every business owner needs to do so that they can adapt quickly, they can spot new trends fast enough. Number three is I think a level of social responsibility is going to be very important, especially because of the pandemic. People are now responding much better to brands that actually have an angle of social responsibility. We always have seen these brands who do like growing trees, et cetera, et cetera. But since the pandemic hit, a lot more brands I think are going to need to talk about that a lot more. And the last one is to be very authentic in your communication message, to keep it very simple, to keep it super authentic, and to keep reminding people what your brand stands for, and to be very human in actually dealing it. Everything is not about sales. Everything is not about conversions all the time. You do need to pay attention to actually how your brand is perceived in the market. So I think these these are the key points that I've been advising some of my clients. The last one that I want to add on actually is specific to Myanmar. The other thing that was interesting to us was the search of search in Google and other search engines, because Myanmar is a country where search really doesn't exist. The interesting behavior that we saw was, when in other countries, when you want to search for something, you go to Google, right? Or Bing, or I don't know, Baidu, whichever channel that is. In Myanmar, you go to Facebook. You don't go anywhere else. So, and then the other interesting point is when they actually want to ask questions, we usually type it into Google. But rather, for consumers in Myanmar, they type it in Facebook groups, they type it in Facebook statuses, etc., expecting other people to recommend stuff. Which is interesting because I've never seen this anywhere else across ASEAN. However, we are seeing some of that changing as well quite quickly. We're seeing a lot more organic search growth happening in Myanmar. So I do believe search is still going to be one of the key important channels that brands need to keep in touch with, especially if they aren't already doing that today.
Insightful talk. Let's move on to the Q&A session from our home audience. So the first question, I think that that all of you can help to answer this is what could be the strategy to untap the baby boomer market so that they would consume more online products or online services. So let's start with Sam in terms of education industry that many baby boomers, some of them that go back to education to learn new skills. So how can you untap this kind of market?
All right, thank you for the question. I would say, speaking from Malaysian experience, the older generation here, they are very, what I call, tough people, in terms of like they know where to find. They are very resourceful, but they are not resourceful when it comes to digital. So they don't use Google to look up for information, but they will ask people, friend or friend recommendation. So they're very referral based people. Um, Reach out to them when it comes to digital. We really have to use, I would say, platforms that they understand to a certain extent. So if you give them IG, probably they need to learn how to understand and use IG. But the most effective way that I've seen in Malaysia to reach out to parents, especially in the education field, or people who are above 40-year-old in Malaysia, is through Facebook. Anyone can have Facebook, and it's very easy to set up. But when we want to do ads or content for them, we have to understand where they are coming from first, in terms of demographic as well. So I understand, like in all of our countries, we have different states, different areas, different regions. So all of us here in Malaysia also, we speak different kinds of languages, different tones, different accents. So the language has to relate to them, and we're trying to keep it simple with them so that they don't get too complicated with like A to C to B to D, but they keep it A to B to C. So that kind of language helps them to be more focused on what is the brand telling them, and at the same time to educate them about a specific brand. I'll leave to the other panelists also to add on. Yeah.
Uh, let's move on to our next speakers. Let's start with Mr. Pompiti. What do you think about the untapped baby boomer market? What should we do with this market? Unmute.
Sorry. Actually, I quite agree with Samuel. And if I add more, in my opinion, I think the company, the brand have to come back and ask themselves first that why they have to change baby boomer behavior. Because in my point of view, I think the good marketing, they have to like to bring the brand to the consumer life, not change their behavior. So I think my tips is you have to like to truly understand them, what is their behavior, what the media that they use. Maybe it's the television or radio, and you have to bring some creativity ideas to make the brand related with them. So yeah, this is my point of view. You have to not change their behavior, but bring your brand to their life.
Yes, thank you very much for. Let's move on to Jeff. What is your point of view on the untapped market of
Yeah.
the baby boomer market, especially in Myanmar?
Yeah, I agree with both of the panelists. The only point that I wanted to add on is, in terms of behavior change, what I've been observing, at least, well, actually, my own grandmother, is that when behaviors start to, it takes some time for them to change behavior, but when it changes for good, right? So the classic example that I always use is, 2 years ago, my grandma watches a lot of Korean movies. I'm sure a lot of people do. And she watches excessively on television, right? And I mean, when I met her 2 years, I mean, when I frequently visit her, I always tell her that, look, there's always a lot more options on your smartphone because, there's Netflix, there's streaming. You don't need to wait for the 8 p.m. slot or the 9 p.m. slot to wait for your favorite show. It took me about 1.5 years to convince. Now, this year, she sold off her TV. She no longer has a TV in her home, right? So the point that I'm trying to make is, as a brand, I think we need to understand that behavior change will happen. it's just a question of how long it will take to happen. But we all have to remember that when it happens for good, and that we need to be ready to quickly adapt our tactics and quickly adapt our strategy.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to the last question from the home audience. So the audience asked that maybe we can ask Jeff again, how do you convince the client that social media marketing works, and what is the actual mechanism to support this? Like, how can you convince them, convince the client, especially the client, that social media marketing actually help to sell products, help to sell the services?
Yeah. In my opinion, that's always been a challenge. I mean, I wouldn't say it's easy. I think the ultimate issue. I think we need to first understand the issue. I think the issue is that it's really difficult to, I guess, say that because usually when clients ask you questions, like, they will think like, okay, if I do, let's say, 6 to 20 posts a month, I'm gonna get X amount of dollar return value back, right? But it doesn't work that way. Right? I think we have to show the client that it doesn't work that way. And if they're thinking that it's going to work that way, and if they keep asking you questions, if they keep continuing to argue that point, then that may not be the right type of client that you want to work with, right? Because ultimately, yes, you can try. However, you first need to do brand building. You need to, nurture the client. It's not just about sell. The second thing is with social media, particularly in my experience, we're selling a lot of Facebook because the primary communication channel in Myanmar is Facebook. The challenge that I find also is the fact that there's no attribution for Facebook towards sales. So it's really difficult to say, because of this particular post that engaged with my customers so well organically, that I received $30,000 in return on investment. It also doesn't work that way, right? So what I tell my client usually is Facebook is not the only solution to your problems. It's only a part of the solution. So while it's important that while it's important to have social media marketing, you also need to think about other channels. You also need to think about Google. You also need to think about content. You also need to think about podcasts, et cetera, and you need to figure out what the right channel mix is, so that you can use the budget smartly. The last thing is I'm always advising my clients to invest in analytics. It's surprising how many brands don't do analytics enough. I've seen major multinational brands who have no idea what happens when a customer lands on their website. There's no tracking on clicks. There's no tracking on conversion. There's no funneling, all of that. So I think it's important to invest in analytics in the early days, because that's really where you can set up your framework. So I do understand the urge to launch a website and sell. However, it's important to get these fundamentals and frameworks right.
Yes, thank you very much for your answer. So for the next session, we will end this session. Thank you very much for our four amazing speakers. For our audience, if you like this session, please click like and click share, post emoji on our Facebook page, so you can give a lot of good feedback to us. And for our next episode, we will talk about the future of work, like, are you ready to play it in the next normal? So thank you very much once again, and see you again next week. สวัสดีค่ะ